بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. I have received a question concerning the book of Ibn al-Qayyim, Madarij al-Salikin. And the questioner was told that this book is a book of tasawwuf, soufism. And so we are led to believe from that statement that Ibn al-Qayyim was a soufi, and we are then led to deduct that this gives legitimacy to modern day tasawwuf madahib as they are known in the world. In order to shed light on this particular matter, we're going to explore a number of topics over a number of videos in order to keep them somewhat short. And in this first video, we're going to look at the definition of Sufism and Tasawwuf, and we're going to consider some things about the author of the original book, Manazil al-Sa'irin, which is the book that Ibn al-Qayyim commented in Madarij al-Salikin, and it is well known that Manazil al-Sa'irin is a book of Tasawwuf. So if we're going to say that Manazil al-Sa'irin and Madarij al-Salikin are books of Tasawwuf, and that this gives then legitimacy to modern day Tasawwuf, we have to look at what is Tasawwuf. And we have to see whether the Tasawwuf that is in Manazil al-Sa'irin is the Tasawwuf that is around nowadays, and is Ibn al-Qayyim in line with any of this. The first thing that we need to consider is the definition of Tasawwuf. There are four main opinions on what does the word Tasawwuf even mean. And these four opinions are completely different from each other. You see, in many matters, like, for example, the word wujub, obligation, we're going to see that the scholars are going to have different definitions for wujub, but these definitions all point at the same thing. It's just that some scholars include certain things in the definition and omit other things, whereas others do a different kind of mix depending on a perspective, or some have the ability to give a better expression for certain things, and this is why we have a divergence in definitions. However, all of these point to one same meaning. However, the definitions of tasawwuf are completely different. So some say it is a matter of safa, purity. Others say it is a matter of sufa, or saf, means the first row in the masjid. Then we have, of course, the nisba, the attribution to souf, which is not cotton, another material. I forgot what it's called in English now, because supposedly the early Sufis used to wear that kind of garment that was, very rough, and it was a form of expressing their asceticism and being away from the luxuries of the dunya. And there's a fourth qawl that I don't remember right now. So from the get-go, we see that there is serious disagreement on what are we even talking about. Then we see that Abu al-Qasim Abdul Karim al-Qushayri, the author of the famous book Al-Risalat al-Qushayriya, as it's known, actually negates all those four opinions. And he says that the word, or he indicates that the word is not even an Arabic word. It is not derived from any Arabic root. So, interesting facts. There is a book called تحقيق ما للهند من مقولة في العقل مقبولة أو مرذولة by an author called al-Bayruni. And the Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Dimashqi, in one of his videos, points out that in that book, the author is talking about a faction in India that lives a life of extreme asceticism, not owning anything, and indulging into worship based on seeking hardship for the purpose of enlightenment. Now, I do not have access to that particular book, but if that is correct, then that is definitely a very interesting route to follow in order to get to the bottom of where the word Sufism or Tasawwuf comes from, and also where some of these practices come from. Now, moving on to the definition of Tasawwuf from a point of view of terminology as an Islamic science. As you know, every Islamic science, like fiqh, usul al-fiqh, qawa'id al-fiqh, ilm al-hadith, mustalah al-hadith, etc. All these sciences within the religion have definitions. And all these definitions aim at defining this science. When you define something, it means that you show its limits. What is it about? Where does this science start and where does it stop? For example, when we're talking about fiqh vs. usul al-fiqh, the scholars say that fiqh is about the ahkam shar'iyya al-zahira, that is dealing with the apparent actions of the sharia, like how to perform salah, how to perform hajj, how to perform wudu, matters of how to make a marriage, how does divorce have to happen, business, etc. So those are all apparent observable matters. But by looking at the detailed adillah, the detailed text of the Quran and the Sunnah, whereas usul al-fiqh is dealing with the same topic, however, we're looking at the general adillah, not the detailed ones. So from here, we see that these two definitions put a clear line between this science and this science. And this one here has certain rules that apply to it, has its own terminologies, has its own books, whereas this science has other terminologies, other books, etc. And they both come together in the mind of the scholar, and this is how he is able to deduct rulings in our religion. However, when it comes to Sufism, we see that the definitions are very vague. Like, for example, a definition that is brought by al-Junayd is أن تكون مع الله وتقطع أو بقطع العلائق, something along those lines. Is that you be with Allah and cutting off every relation, meaning every relation to the dunya. Now, how does that enable you to define where Sufism starts and Sufism ends? Furthermore, when we're looking at the development of the madhahib of tasawwuf through time, we see that what al-Junayd has mentioned is in no way, shape, or form what has limited the madhahib of tasawwuf. The madhahib of tasawwuf very quickly went into matters of aqidah, creed, and a specific methodology that is particular to the Sufi madhab, that enables them to discover the science of creed without looking at the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, as we shall see in a later video, inshallah ta'ala. So from the get-go, we see that when we're talking about Sufism, we actually don't know exactly what it is that we are talking about. When we then look at the different Sufis, we see that they are busying themselves and have a worldview and a view of their religion that is so different, to the point that many of them make takfir of each other, that when we say Ibn al-Qayyim is a Sufi, what are we talking about? If we're saying that the original author of the book, Manazil al-Sa'irin, is a Sufi, what kind of Sufi are we talking about? Furthermore, next point we got to consider is the author of Manazil al-Sa'irin is a Sheikh al-Imam Abu Ismail al-Ansari al-Harawi. He is the author of the famous book, Dhamm al-Kalam wa Ahlihi, the blameworthiness of Kalam and its people. Now, considering the fact that Sufi factions in this day and age all have adopted the science of Kalam to some extent in their madhab, the Sufis that attribute themselves to the Ash'ari madhab, they will most likely have taken the qawa'id of Kalam from the Ash'ari madhab, which is strictly based on Kalam, whereas the Sufis from the Hanafi madhab will most likely have adopted the rulings of the Maturidi Kalam madhab, the Malikis as well, going into the Ash'ari madhab. So how can we say that the man who wrote the original book, who has compiled one of the best compilations on what the A'imma of the first generations, including a Shafi'i, including Malik, including al-Awza'i, al-Thawri, and others from the big names of the first generation, all speaking out against this science of kalam. How can you take this man's stance on his understanding of Sufism as any kind of proof for legitimacy of modern day Sufi madahib? That makes absolutely no sense. In further videos, we're going to be looking at what is the methodology of certain early Sufis as well as the later Sufis in discovering the science of Aqidah, not studying or deducting, but discovering the science of Aqidah. And then we're going into the most important point. What is the deduction that these people make through their sciences of discovery concerning the Aqidah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hereafter? VS, what is Ibn al-Qayyim about in this very book, Madarij al-Salikin, that they have mentioned. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.